Welcome classic rock fans to another listening video, and on this fine August morning I thought it was appropriate I could list the 10 best summer albums. Word of warning, of course, these albums aren't necessarily about the summer or summer themed, but what they are is a part of an anthology of LPs that form my essential summer listening from June to August. Just like to say, if you are new to this channel, do click like, subscribe and check that bell. And do check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the work done here at Classic Album Review. Well, that being said, let's move on to the first album on my list. Number 10 is Beach Boys' Surfing Safari from 1962. When this band were all about singing songs about hot rods and girls and surfing, of course. Lots of reverb-drenched guitars and driving rhythms, all complemented, of course, by the serene vocals of the band themselves. But 1962 was a strange year in many respects. Chuck Berry was doing Porridge, Jerry Lee Lewis was doing His Cousin, Elvis was doing these trite Hollywood films, and of course Little Richard had found God. There existed a perfect vacuum for something young and dumb, and up sprung the Beach Boys with loads of summer anthems that tapped into all the sticky hormonal yearnings of America's youth. Brian Wilson contributes about 9 original songs for this album, which was quite rare for a pop record in 1962. Interesting, I read somewhere, I don't know if it's true or not, that the vast majority of orders came from other parts of America, and in fact the Beach Boys felt compelled to include some blurb on the back of the LP explaining to non-Californians what surfing actually was. It's a wonderful album that I find just great fun to listen to. My favourite track of this album is one that many critics have described as ill-advised that the band recorded, but I just love it, and that's Moondog. Number 9 is The Byrds' Fifth Dimension from 1966. This is a remarkable album. If we think about some contextual framing here, you get Pink Floyd, The Grateful Dead, Country Joe and the Fish yet to record their first albums. I presume Pet Sounds wasn't out yet either. And Jefferson Airplane's Surrealistic Pillow was still half a year away from completion. But then there was this album teeming with melodic drama and trippiness, when psychedelic music was just a twinkle in the eye of the San Francisco set. That is until we get the rumblings of 8 Miles High. That sonic collage of kinetically infused guitar sound, its astral musings and pumping bass line, not to mention that fractured guitar solo, all of course relating to the Byrds' first trip to London, I believe, in 1965. This song was immediately interpreted as a drug song. This is immaculate psychedelic folk with its workings of traditional numbers like Wild Mountain Thyme and of course one of my favourites, John Riley. There's no doubt about it that they devised and thrashed out some of the best early psychedelic rock, drawing from the influence of Indian raga in the guitar arrangements and other quirky use of harmonies, vocals and overall guitar sounds. Get the country tinged Mr. Spaceman on this one, and the wonderful I See You with that great 12-string trippy guitar solo. My summer starts with these very jangly opening guitar notes, all in 5D, I have to say. Number 8 is The Electric Prunes from 1967. The eponymous debut from 1967 is a lysergic, pulsating classic, very much defined by, in the words of AllMusic, the throbbing buzz of Ken Williams' tremolo-laden fuzz-toned guitar, as they launch, of course, into their biggest hit in the USA, that is, I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night. It's a dark album that certainly has LSD at its core, but it lacks the trippy frothiness of their contemporaries. This music really digs deep. In the words of David Hassinger, the lyrics, the melody and the rhythm find their way into the inward places of the soul on which they mightily fasten. I believe their second album was a very trippy rendering of the Catholic Mass, which made it intriguing listening for me. I think the Electric Prunes were amongst that first echelon of groups that could be called garage rock bands. And I love every track on this album as they weave a colourful but moody tapestry of bizarre sounds and musings. Of course, we get the excellent percussive stylings of Mark Tulin on bass and drummer Preston Ritter, providing an expansive backbeat to these wonderful psychedelic soundscapes. My favourites on this album, the rather goofy The King is in the Counting House, and not to mention the somewhat ridiculous Tunaville Trolley. Number 7 is Tim Buckley's Goodbye and Hello from 1967. This is indeed a fabulous album, a wonderful example of Buckley's psychedelic folk, and a step up from the debut album, has to be said. This album certainly basks in the afterglow of Sgt. Pepper and that spirit of avant-garde adventurism. It's a trippy one for sure, all wrapped up in Buckley's incredible musical vision and voice. The best numbers on this album are Once I Was and Pleasant Street, and it has to be said that this album is buoyed by Jerry Yester's excellent production. These numbers really shine through that lysergic fog that descended in 1967, and these songs form a catalogue of, in my opinion, some of Buckley's greatest work. A few tracks, namely the title track, as well as No Man Can Find the War, its litany of sound effects and very evocative lyrics. If I'm not mistaken, the lyrics are actually drawn from a poem by Larry Beckett. So, as you can imagine, the words are poignant, literary, and quite moving, I have to say. And they provide a wonderful platform for Buckley's plaintive timbre. Carnival Song has my head swimming along, I must say, and Hallucinations is a bong-inspiring number. Number 6 is the Moody Blues in Search of the Lost Chord from 1968. Mellotron, that's all I really need to say about this record, and that's enough for me. I love the sound of the mellotron, and I just find myself immersed in it on this album. This trippy excursion is all built around a concept of quest and discovery, real-world discovery in the guise of Dr. Livingstone, I presume, philosophical exploration, houses of four doors, spiritual callings, voices in the sky, and that higher plane in Legend of a Mind, that tribute to Timothy Leary, that hero of American consciousness who was encouraging us all to tune in, turn on and drop out, or something like that. We get space exploration in the song Departure, and I have to say this is certainly a song that has me exploring the astral plane, shall we say. All Music says In Search of the Lost Chord is an album where the Moody Blues discovered drugs and mysticism as the basis for songwriting, which is certainly true, and as a result we get this lysergic album that steps beyond the confines of a day, which very much held us on the last album, of course, the album that precedes this one. I have to say that thankfully all that orchestral baroque that very much defined the previous album has been replaced by the gorgeous tones of Mike Pinder's Mellotron. In the words of Joni Mitchell, it pours in like butterscotch and clings to all the senses. And I have to say the rest of the band all contribute wonderfully on this record with flutes, sitar, cellos. Perhaps they were trying to out-pepper the Beatles. Number 5 is Quicksilver Messenger Service from 1968. This debut album was a little bit more restrained than the band's usual improvisational live forays that they were famed for around about this time. This self-titled collection is absolutely superb with its emphasis on almost melodic folk. Highlights include Pride of Man, Light Your Windows, and the wonderful, wonderful Dino song. Gold and Silver is an excellent instrumental jam, and of course we do get that 12-minute meandering one, The Fool, which is sufficiently loopy to keep me interested. They're one of those great San Francisco bands, distinguished, I think, by that twin guitar sound that they have. This band had been knocking about quite a while, gathering up quite a loyal following, a following that had to wait some considerable time before they actually put out an album. In fact, the guitarist-singer Gary Duncan said he attributes this to the band's lack of focus at the time, saying, "We had no ambition towards making records, we just wanted to have fun, play music and make enough money to be able to afford to smoke pot." Fine, upstanding ambitions they are. Number 4 is the Grateful Dead Anthem of the Sun from 1968. And this is my version with its very trippy, wobbly type sleeve. Wonderful. I know what you're thinking, of course. You're saying, bloody hell, Baz, all these albums from 1968-67. But yes, there was something specific about this period in music that certainly complements the alcohol-induced wooziness of summer. So Grateful Dead Anthem of the Sun, the band's second album. I mean, their debut album failed to capture what this band represented in terms of a live, very improvisational band. And this album seamlessly juxtaposes the band's live performances with through the collage-like editing approach, with a kind of lysergic, meandering soundscapes. Tom Constantin added some really interesting elements to the recording of this album, some nice embellishments. Many of those embellishments, of course, were dampened down by the 1972 remix. So the Grateful Dead begin to refine their live performances and merge it with the gorgeously trippy That's It for the Other One suite. The tracks like New Potato Caboose and Weir's apparently autobiographical Born Cross-Eyed. These are all intriguing numbers and were supposed to have emerged organically during the band's live performances. Those famed extended on-stage improvisations. Alligator's all Ron Pigpen McKernan, and this workout melds a second extended sonic collage of this record. It provides a fascinating juxtaposition with his driving blues ethos colliding beautifully, I have to say, with the Dead's innate improvisational psychedelia. Number 3 is Jefferson Airplane's Surrealistic Pillow from 1967. This remarkable consciousness-expanding fusion really floats my boat. Usually down a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies, it has to be said. Not as psychedelic as something like the 13th Floor Elevators, with Rocky Erickson wailing away like some lysergic James Brown, or Toby Hall with that electric jug of his, but pretty trippy nonetheless. I mean, it has to be said that the Grateful Dead and the Aeroplane Jefferson Airplane that is, was still operating within the paradigms of folk, rock, blues and bluegrass at this time. Today is my favourite track on this album. I love the plaintive voice of Marty Balin and that exquisite guitar motif provided by Jerry Garcia. This band certainly made an impression. In fact, Donovan references the Jefferson Airplane in his song Fat Angel, I think it is. And these were strange times indeed. I mean, Marty Balin recalls them playing the Fillmore and flicking acid tabs like Smarties into the audience. The two most famous tracks on this album, which I don't have to name, were brought over when Grace Slick joined the band, moved over to the Jefferson Airplane from the Great Society. Of course, the Alice in Wonderland inspired number. Lewis Carroll was quite very much in vogue at this time with his very meandering, surreal and dreamlike narratives. Really struck a chord in 1966-67. Can't think why. Nevertheless, these songs give this album a dreamlike, whimsical quality, which inspires Garcia to name the album Surrealistic Pillow. Famed, of course, for that lurid bubblegum pink sleeve. Not the sleeve they'd actually intended, but hey, maybe these things happen for a reason. Number 2 is Donovan, A Gift from a Flower to a Garden from 1967. This is an exquisite slice of hippie-dillic folk. I can't even believe I used the word hippie-dillic. Is that even a word? I don't know. You get the munchies just listening to this album. Makes you want to dust off your caftan. In the album's liner notes, Donovan explains his reason for creating two rather different discs. One is for the present generation, he said, and the other is for the dawning generation. This, of course, was the age of Aquarius, and Donovan was no stranger to putting some quite veiled references to marijuana and possibly LSD into his music. This album was very much defined by Donovan's soft purring vocals, his interesting guitar intonations, not to mention the transcendental skull-buggery lyrics of his, which are just perfect for a summer's day. Standout tracks like Where Your Love Like Heaven, Lullaby of Spring, The Magpie, and my favourite, Starfish on the Toast, with its lisping sea and references to Daffodilly and Fine Rock Pooling Coast. Good lord, it's like the BFG. I have to say that Sunshine Superman is another fine album from around about this time as well. It contains my favourite Donovan song, which is Three Kingfishers. Number 1 is Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle from 1968. This is a remarkable piece of British psychedelia from this short-lived band, I have to say, and this magnus opus of a record with its misspelt sleeve is just essential listening. The quality of the songwriting is definitely there, with its trippy sensibilities underpinned by some rather dark narratives, that has to be said. Narratives of loss and conflict and war, of course, being analogous with a Carvery. We get the very Eleanor Rigby-like Rose for Emily, and perhaps one of my favourites of all time is Hung Up on a Dream. Some of the things that define this album are the exquisite vocal melodies, the bold chord changes, not to mention the rather intriguing Baroque instrumentation, all wrapped up in these ethereal, mellotron-drenched, swirling soundscapes. This band mined the subtleties and nuances of 1960s counterculture pop, and managed to bypass a lot of the whimsy and flim-flam of their contemporaries, instead delving deeper and exploring the melancholy buried beneath the sunny harmonies of their contemporaries. And the result is a rich palette of songs that are mesmerising and beguiling, even 50-odd years later. Anyway, that's my list of top 10 summer albums. A few honourable mentions of music that I really like to listen to this time of year, as well as the the first few Grand Funk Railroad albums, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Buffalo Springfield, Music for the Mind and Body by Country Joe and the Fish, and perhaps one of my favourites that should have made this list is The Ladies of the Canyon by Joni Mitchell. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this excursion back to the Summer of Love, that you will subscribe, share and like this video, and hopefully stay healthy, stay safe, but more importantly that you keep listening.